Welcome back to another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast presented by the Kings Herald. My name is Brendan Nunez, and today we got a local guy on here, Jrue. What's going on?
Not much, man. Not much. Literally not much at all. Ever since the Kings season ended, it's kind of just been, I don't know. Kind of just feel lost. The weather outside too would reflect that. We're 1 week into June and it's not extremely hot yet, which is odd. So it's just been weird. I've kind of just been lost in the wilderness ever since the season ended. But how about you, man? How you doing?
I did think the other day to I debated counting how many days it had been since the last beam, and then just decided against it. But it's probably been a while, I remember Frankie was joking about it during the series that well, tonight's the last beam we're gonna see,
Mm-hmm.
and you just never know when's gonna be the last beam.
Dude.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
tough not to be.
After game 6, I did debate it. I was like, should I go down to Doko to see the beam? This might be the last beam that we'll see. And had the Kings had they even won game 7, the beam, we wouldn't have been able to see the beam. It was an afternoon game, right? So we wouldn't have been able to see it till later that night. So I was like, man, I might want to go see it. Then I just didn't. So it's been a long time since the last beam that I saw, because I was there for games 1 and 2, and then the Warriors reeled off 3 straight, and then and no beam since game 2 for me against the Warriors. So yeah, it's been a long time, man. The withdrawals are real.
I can tell. Yeah. Going through it. Other random topic for you real quick before we get into this.
Mm-hmm.
Messi going to the MLS and going to
gosh.
Miami. My question for you is, I saw ticket sales went crazy, right? I don't know if you saw,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the exact variance of numbers, but it was pretty drastic, their opening day sales. And my question to you is, if you bought a ticket just because you were just something to do, you live in the area,
Yeah.
prior to that, do you sell it and make a lot of money, or
Oh man.
are you for me, I think it'd be pretty hard not to just go and just flex how much I paid on everybody else there.
Dude, I would go. Now that's me being a big time soccer and what other people around the world would call football fan. I mean, Messi to me, my GOAT. I know there's this Ronaldo versus Messi thing, but you got a guy coming you get a guy like him coming here to America. It's once in a lifetime, and who knows how many more seasons he's going to play after this, right? Yeah, I did see the massive spike in resale prices for not just their home games, but when they visit other stadiums as well. And I believe my cousin Zach, your good buddy Zach,
I've seen him in the Messi shirts.
Yep, big time Messi fan. He's heartbroken that he's not going back to Barcelona because he's also a Barcelona fan. But he told me earlier that Inter Miami, their Instagram page today alone, has gained like 2.5 million followers and counting.
Yeah,
it's just unreal, the influence that man has. So yeah, to answer your question, I would go and be like, oh yeah, I got an early. I bought these tickets months ago. I'm a season ticket holder or whatever, and I would 100% flex on somebody who paid 10 times the retail price or whatever it is.
easily. I agree. I am not somebody that keeps up with soccer, football as much as I sometimes want to. I love FIFA for what it's worth, and that's where a lot of my knowledge comes from. Not gonna lie, which says a lot. But anyways, basketball podcast, and there was a big basketball game today. Game 3, NBA Finals. Nuggets retook home court advantage by winning one in whatever the hell the name of that stadium is. It has changed names a few times.
I saw it on the court earlier, and I told myself, no, I'm not calling it that.
No, absolutely not. The stadium right on the water in South Beach.
Yes.
109-94. Triple doubles from both Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic.
Right.
Just what stood out to you watching this one?
Nikola Jokic is doing something that quite literally that we've never seen. The first player in finals history to have a 30-20-10 game. He's the best player on the planet right now. He has normalized greatness. We've seen a lot of guys do that, not just in basketball, but really a lot of sports. Jokic he's in that stratosphere right now where he just goes out there. He plays at his own speed. It doesn't look like he's exerting any energy at all most of the time. And he just, you look at the box score and you're just amazed at what that guy's doing out there. It's unbelievable. And it's very interesting watching what the Nuggets have done roster construction wise, and then kind of comparing it to what the Kings have done. Right now, nobody's Nikola Jokic. Some people like to say that Domantas Sabonis is Nikola Jokic light. I wouldn't even go that far because Jokic is really like he's that good. He really is in his own lane. But you have a playmaking big, a playmaking hub, a guy that is a big screen assist guy, can make plays for others, is rooted to the ground around that elbow area. I wouldn't be surprised if Monte McNair looked at what Tim Connolly and now Calvin Booth, what they're doing or what they did in Denver. And, he and Wes Wilcox say, well, that's kind of the imprint there, right? Like, isn't that kind of the blueprint that we should go with? And maybe the Kings can somehow replicate that. Obviously, that Denver's depth, that squad is it's just miles better than the Kings and really a lot of teams in the playoffs this postseason, and it's a big reason why they've gotten to where they are. But yeah, just like the one main observation I take away from all of that is just Jokic is unbelievable.
Jokic is unbelievable. Jamal Murray hits some insane shots.
Mm-hmm.
Having a guy that can bail you out off the dribble like that is super important. And he did everything really. I thought he had some really big defensive effort moments. He was on the offensive glass, the rebound battle, just Denver totally killed them in that aspect tonight. And I do, to your point of, Jokic kind of normalizing this. And I felt like Domas did the same with his game. Obviously, there's not the same level.
Mm-hmm.
I do really much like that meme of Charmander is Şengün, Charmeleon is Sabonis, and then Charizard is Jokic. Yes, I think that's as accurate as it gets. But it's just amazing seeing it, and big win. Jimmy looked good and Bam looked good on the other side, but guys weren't hitting shots. I think Gabe Vincent getting in foul trouble really hurt.
Yeah.
I think he's been one of their most important guys, and then nobody else was really getting them to go down. So is what it is. Happens. Next game is, I believe, on Friday. Is that right?
Yeah,
they only get 1 day.
It's the one 1 day gap in this series. The rest of the way, and then obviously the 2 games prior, it was 2 days rest in between. So, yeah, quick turnaround. So, I don't know exactly who that favors, but I would imagine you're in Miami. You would probably just, if you're the coaches at least, you're thinking, yeah, let's just get in and get out. I don't want an extra day for any type of foolishness that might occur. For if I'm Mike Malone, I'm like, yeah, let's just get these 2 games in 3 days and get the heck out of there. Go back to Denver. So that might favor the Nuggets in that regard. But look, these are 2 great coaches, but Eric Spoelstra historically is in the postseason. He's a guy that just, you expect the adjustments to come. You expect the chess match to get even more complex and to go another layer beneath the surface. Mike Malone, I'm sure, will be ready for whatever is thrown at him, but Spo just continually does these things where it's just like, how does he even think of these things? Like sometimes you think to yourself, okay, how does he even think of this? And then others, it's just like, dude, the balls to even try that. Like it's unreal, that guy. So I don't think anybody should count the Heat out. But I mean, just top to bottom, very, very, just complete performance by the Nuggets today. Really the only time where I was thinking to myself, ooh, they might be kind of losing it is at the end when the Heat were kind of throwing full court pressure at them. But that seems to happen a lot in the NBA, and then it doesn't really have much of an impact on the next game. So yeah, we'll see. It's been a pretty entertaining series through 3 games. I think it's about all we could ask for. But we will see. And for me personally, I don't have a rooting interest either way, but just love seeing the chess match and the X's and O's. And I guess if I had to choose, I mean, I'd love to see Michael Malone get one, especially after the Kings did him dirty. So, maybe I'd lean Nuggets, but it's been a fun series. It's been about all that we can ask for.
It's been entertaining. I like your coach's chess match. Like Spoelstra, when they talked about today that Miami's run more zone than every other team in the league combined this postseason, I thought that was hilarious. And Michael Malone, in just the clips that they showed of him mic'd up, had ready for me to. I was ready to run through a wall.
Yeah.
I especially liked the talking to the other players on the team of how many years have you been in the league? Jeff Green, I think he says 16, however long it is. How
Yeah.
many finals have you been to? 2, and goes around and puts into perspective. I thought that was a great moment from former King head coach Mike Malone, but now current King head coach Mike Brown has still plenty of guys under contract headed into next year. And the
Yep.
plan for today's episode is to focus on one area of improvement, identify one ideal area of improvement for each player that is still under contract. And just for clarity's sake, guys under contract is going to be De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, Kevin Huerter, Richaun Holmes, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, Davion Mitchell, and I did include PJ Dozier as a non-guarantee and Kessler Edwards, who has a team option. Did I send you Keon as well? I probably should have put Keon in this. I don't know how I overlooked
Yeah,
that.
you should have.
All right, we'll do Keon.
So.
And maybe we'll even do Neemi. I think he's
Yeah.
a restricted free agent, but we'll do Neemi anyways.
I'm telling my good friend Keon you left him off the list.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Hopefully he forgives me. But I want to start with, though, like, I think that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about internal improvement coming from this group. You know, all of these guys are pretty young, actually. Age wise, you're talking about 22 for Kessler Edwards and Keegan Murray. That's the youngest. 23 for Keon Ellis, Neemias Queta. 24 for Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, and Kevin Huerter. You have De'Aaron Fox at 25, PJ Dozier at 26, Domantas Sabonis at 26, and then Richaun Holmes at the bottom at 29. So it's a pretty young group, and I think it's realistic to expect internal improvement from some of these guys. Like, you certainly hope Fox and Sabonis are able to get better, and then just like maybe you can, and Keegan Murray being a rookie, obviously last year going into year 2, but if you can get some sort of significant jump from a Davion Mitchell, a Malik Monk, a Kevin Huerter, like, I think it would do so much for this group.
Yeah, I'm with you. I, for the first time in a long time, have so much faith in the coaching staff and the player development. These guys flashed improvement throughout the season, and that's so difficult to do when you're dealing with the grind of an 82 game season and then plus another 7 games if you include the playoffs, right? So for them to continually show that they can develop these guys during the course of a season, that should give you a lot of confidence that they can get some positive results during the offseason when really all you're doing is skill development. And obviously conditioning is going to be a big factor for the way the Kings play, but also, you know, when you look at a couple of guys in that Warriors series, really, namely Kevin Huerter, I mean, we saw the guy's legs were just dead. And, you know, he himself during his exit interview said, yeah, I I need to get my stamina up. You know, he knows. So this is the perfect time for that to happen. These guys are, you know, we've already been seeing clips, right? Videos of these guys already just back in the practice facility working on their games. I'm sure they know what they need to improve on. If they don't, then the coaching staff will remind them what they need to improve on. And I'm with you. I think the confidence level is pretty high with what we can expect as far as improvements go for these players going into next season.
I think they're all kind of hanging out a bit here and there as well. I know at very least publicly the Chima Monecki post that he put out of a bunch of guys that flew out there. I don't know if they caught one of his AS Monaco games. I would assume so, but who knows? An excuse to go out there sounds nice no matter, I'm sure.
Dude. Yeah.
But let's get into these players. We'll go in order of points per game. So let's start with De'Aaron Fox, and you'll go first on this one.
I mean, it's almost been kind of the same thing every year with him. I almost want to pick something just for the sake of I want to pick something different just for the sake of picking something different. But I mean, it's the 3-pointer, right? If he can get that up to above 36%, and I mean, it's not like he shot the ball horribly this past season, right? But he was still low 30s, I think. You get that up above 36%, closer to league average, or, you know, even what you would consider to be a good 3-point shooter. Then what do defenses do, right? You already own the highest offensive rating in NBA history, this Kings team from this past season. So for me, it's the jump shot. It'll open up so much more. You look at how much better he shot the ball this season as opposed to the season prior. And look at what that opened up for this team, right? Obviously, he's never going to be, and I don't think he's ever going to be consistently like an elite 3-point shooter. He loves the mid-range area for obvious reasons. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The guy owns the mid-range area. It's a big reason why he was so effective this past season. A big reason why he won Clutch Player of the Year, because he can get any shot he wants in that area, and he'll knock that down with consistency. But if he can space the floor even more as a 3-point shooter, I mean, that's going to open up so much more for not only himself but the people around him. And if you run that 2-man game with Domas, with him and Domas on an empty side, I don't know how you would be able to find an answer for a 2-man game involving Fox and Domas with an empty corner, and Fox has an improved 3-point shot. So for me, it's the shot. I think that opens up so much more if he's able to become a better shooter from beyond the arc.
Hard to argue with the 3-point shot. I think De'Aaron acknowledged that as well. Something he was always going to work on in his exit interviews this year. 34.3% on catch and shoot, 30% on pull-ups, on wide open threes. He shot 33%. Funnily enough, if it was 4 seconds or less than the shot clock, Mr. Clutch Player of the Year, 40% from three, of course.
Shocker.
But I absolutely agree. I do think like the percentage he put it up at this year, that 32.4%, combined with being a lethal mid-range player, like even if the 3-point shot doesn't get better, obviously he's still going to be able to be effective to large extents, just like we saw last year, but it would do just that much more. I actually went with consistency, and I think it was something Mike Brown had mentioned throughout the course of the year, that he thought if De'Aaron could just do it the whole game long, that he has a chance to really be elite, and it probably stands out more quarter by quarter. But I just looked at half, and I think Kevin Huerter also mentioned on, I believe it was JJ Redick's podcast, how he noticed that De'Aaron is somebody that ramps up throughout the course of the game, right?
Yeah.
But first half, De'Aaron averaged 12.3 points, 3.3 assists. And then the second half, that goes up to 15.1 points and 4.4 assists. I have no issues like with the way that he goes about it. I think he's kind of trying to feel it out. He's trying to get other players involved early, because he can just turn it on at any point. And some of these other guys need to get into a rhythm in order to be effective in late game scenarios. So I get it. But if he can find a way to have that same impact in the first half that he does in the second, that could really take him to, like, we're not talking third team All NBA anymore.
Yeah, that's always the main complaint that I do see on the timeline during games is where's Fox in the first half? Why does he only show up in the fourth quarter? That's not necessarily true. I think you're being a little bit too broad when you say that.
Right.
I would agree with that. I would agree that he does kind of ramp up as the game goes on. I kind of compare it to an elite starting pitcher. He's not going to come out. He's not going to throw flames right away as the game starts. He's got to get to that point by loosening up and having thrown enough pitches, right? And I think that analogy kind of applies to De'Aaron, but that would definitely be second on my list for sure, because sometimes he'll do the disappearing act thing in the first half, and then in the second half, all of a sudden he comes out and he just goes nuts. How many potentially 50-point games could De'Aaron Fox have had this past season had he just come out the gates just guns blazing and kept that same level out throughout the entire game? Who knows? We know that he's capable of having prolific scoring nights like that. So, I like that one as well for sure. I think if he was able to be more consistent and also add on a consistent 3-point shot, I mean, we're talking about easy. The guy's going to be in like the top 5 point guard conversation. People are saying, yeah, he's like fringe, top 7, 8 or something like that. There's, point guard's a deep position, but he'd be from in the top 5 if he was just out there just dropping 30 every single night. And we know he's capable of doing that.
Next up, Domantas Sabonis. I will go first on this one. I think we should go alternating here because we're bound to take each other's at some point here. I went with the mid-range jumper. We saw that the way Golden State was playing off of him, and I think that he actually knocked him down at a good rate this year. 4 to 14 feet, 51%. If you go 14 feet to the 3-point line, 45%. And that 45% is actually a decent bit better than some of his previous seasons. But the frequency was down a lot this year. And I get that that's not a shot within the flow of their offense. But I think that just being comfortable with that shot, because I think he's shown the ability to knock it down. It's just low volume. And I don't think he seemed the most comfortable. It's also something he talked about in his exit interviews. But having that shot, I think, would be really important. Obviously, ideally, it would be a 3-point shot, but I'm kind of taking steps here. If I
Yeah.
could just piece anything in here, it'd be for him to shoot like Jokic, obviously,
Right.
But give me that mid-range shot, and I think that's enough to just make teams think twice about defending you the way that Looney was able to of helping off like that.
Yeah, again, I can't say it enough. Just a brilliant, brilliant defensive game plan by the Warriors. I mean, it's obviously having Kevon Looney too is almost like a cheat code. He's the perfect guy to deploy that type of game plan with, and it took away so much of the Kings' offense. And then on top of that, the Warriors just did a great job. DiVincenzo, Moody, Kuminga when they were in there, just locking and trailing the shooters, making the DHOs more difficult. That was the obvious number one choice. So I guess, just to switch it up for me, I would say he needs something else just besides like those left-hand flips and little hooks or whatever, right? Like that 6 to 8 feet area where it's not technically a mid-range jumper, but it's not technically a layup either. He needs, I don't know, a push shot, maybe he's left-handers typically are just extremely left-handed. I think Domas certainly qualifies as such, maybe use the offhand a little bit more. He just needs more of a, what the kids call a bag these days in that area, right? That would make life so much easier on him because, we saw it in the playoffs. And now that he has the experience of a 7-game series under his belt, he'll know. And I think, he probably already had an idea, but they call games so much differently in the playoffs. And when he's down there and the physicality is just, at the highest that it's been all season, and he and Looney are just beating up on one another, like that kind of softer stuff around the rim is not going to work necessarily. So he's gonna have to. I would hope that he's gonna get a little bit more crafty in like that 5 to 8 foot range or something like that, so that he doesn't always have to settle for a mid range jumper. Which I'm in agreement with you. He needs to get more comfortable with, but also he doesn't necessarily have to, put his shoulder down and go through somebody to get something at the rim either. So I would say that's what I'd love to see him improve on.
I like it. Next up, Kevin Huerter. All you.
I mean, we just talked about it. Stamina. His conditioning's got to be better. He said it himself. February was an insane month for him. Just insane. I don't know. I can't recall if I've ever seen somebody shooting just crater like that.
29.2% in February, and then in March, 51.1%.
And what was he in? Do you have the numbers for October, November?
I do. October, 53.2. It's only 47 total attempts, short month, right? Because it starts that year,
right.
Or that month. November, 41.1. December 37, January 37, February 29, March 51, and April 22, not including playoffs.
Yeah, his 2 months that sandwiched March were so bad that I almost forgot that he had a really, really good March. Yeah, I mean, he was playing such a different role this year offensively for the Kings, right? So I don't expect somebody who really was just, almost relegated to just being like a spot up shooter and like a secondary second side playmaker off of Trae Young to come in and have the legs and know what his body's going to feel like, running around as much as he did. I think he certainly had to be in the top 10 as far as guys with, miles traveled during the season, right? Running. He and Domas, the number one, as far as volume goes, the number one DHO tandem in the league. So that requires a lot of stamina, requires a lot of conditioning, a lot of endurance. And yeah, he hit some walls. And I don't necessarily think he was out of shape per se in the Warriors series. It's just when you're chasing Klay Thompson around on the defensive end and you have to account for his off-ball movement when you're on defense like that, you're going to be running a lot of miles on defense too, on top of the miles you're already running on offense. So for him, to me, stamina, conditioning, it's got to be at the top of the list as far as something that needs to improve.
It's definitely got to be. And like you said, he acknowledged it. I think the physicality of that series on the defensive end affected him offensively. And I do actually think he was one of the players that was notably better in the playoffs defensively. He still did have his games where he had foul trouble, but I think that affected him. And you saw it throughout the course of the season as well. Those second nights of back-to-backs, he was 34.1% from three. The team also practiced all the time. From my understanding, like, it is not typical how often this team practiced. And I don't think the team the players had an issue with that. But it obviously does have an impact when it comes to just the stretch that is an entire 82 game season and whatever your playoff run is going to be. The other thing that I did go with for Kevin Huerter was rebounding. I think it's something that Mike Brown pointed out a lot this year, that he was just pretty inconsistent in that aspect, and the way that they play defense and how often that guards are asked to crack back on bigs. I think that consistency there and physicality, and he has the size to do it. He has decent balance and athleticism to go and do that, where, the 3.3 boards a game is, I think that can be higher. There were 5 or more boards on 21 occasions this year for Kevin Huerter, but he also had 27 games with 2 or less and 7 games without a single board. So I just, my other thing on top of conditioning would be consistency rebounding for Kevin Huerter. And I think that'd be a big improvement for him on the defensive end if he became a better defensive rebounder. Who do we have next year? I believe. Oh, the one other thing I want to ask you real quick on Kevin Huerter, because I just wrote a Kevin Huerter season review for the Kings Herald. Little plug
Saw
there.
that.
His postseason, people make a lot of it, right? 20.5% from 3. Obviously, that sucks. And he actually missed, I believe he had 17. Let me find this number again. Wide open threes. He had 17 wide open threes, and he only made 3 of them. That's obviously not great. There were times where Golden State was obviously playing him really aggressively. I thought that could have opened up more for De'Aaron and Domas, but Domas' lack of a midi jumper, I thought, limited that, and then De'Aaron's thumb limited him in the later games in that series to take advantage of that. But obviously the wide open ones like you want from Huerter, but 20.5% in this series. But then you go back even, right? 29% in his last postseason. They got eliminated round 1 against Miami with Atlanta, right? Eastern Conference Finals. So his last postseason series prior to that, 26.3%. But then you look at his first round against the Knicks, 45%. That next round against Philadelphia is sort of the well-known one, 27 in game 7, right? Which actually he didn't do it on threes. It was like all 2s. But 37% from 3 in that series. But 20% in that Warriors series, and the 2 series prior, 29%, 26.3%. And it's meaningless, but the 3-point contest showing didn't exactly help your case for people that say you shrink under bright lights. I'm not ready to say that with Huerter at all, but people are absolutely starting to feel that way. And when you look at it, I'm like, I get why people are worried about it. I'm absolutely not there yet, but is there something there?
Well, I'll point this out because somebody else pointed it out the night of the 3-point contest. You know who else had the same exact score as he did in the 3-point contest?
Kevin Hart.
Michael Jordan.
Oh, so, nice. Different directions. But
it's think about it. There might be something there. Yeah, I get why you're worried. I'm not there yet either. I don't want it. Just labeling a guy as a dude who just shrinks in the big moments. I think you're going to need a lot more of a sample size with the team that he's currently playing with, obviously. So, I mean, he had 2 playoff runs with the Hawks and had that legendary game 7 against Philly. I think that one game carried his legacy for a good while. People were just like, oh, it's Kayvon. Kayvon's Kayvon's a big time playoff performer. And you look at the numbers, you're like, is he? Because he really didn't perform all that well outside of that series and then really that game, right? I do recall him struggling against the Knicks. I mean, not the Knicks, against who was it in 2021? It was
Milwaukee
in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then. Then in the first round, the season before he got traded to Sacramento. So, I'm not there yet to call him this dude that just becomes small on the big stage, but it'll be something to monitor. And really, I think next season, during the course of the season, all we can ask for is just consistency. See if we can just keep it around the same percentage month to month. And then hopefully that carries over into the playoffs. But obviously he's well aware of what he needs to get better at, well aware that his conditioning needs to get a lot better. I would think that he would not come out, in a playoff series if the Kings get back there next season. I would bet money on him not coming out and shooting 20% from three again, because that's just abysmal.
Agreed. And to be clear, I'm absolutely not there yet either.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is an aspect of like, sure, he's been there before, but this is the first time with this role in this team and system and everything. I think that plays an aspect. And, career high effective field goal percentage, 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, finishing at the rim. Offensive rating with Huerter on the floor, 121 with a plus 4.5 net rating. With him off the floor, 113.6 with a plus 1.2 net rating. Like, when it comes down to it, Huerter was super important, and I think he's going to be fine. But anyways, that's my little Huerter rant because I just wrote about him. Next one we got is Keegan Murray, and I think I'm up, huh? I went with finishing at the rim. This is something that I just all the time with Keegan this year. It's like, bro, please dunk the ball.
Yeah.
Please dunk the ball.
Yes.
Monty McNair, the day that he drafted Keegan Murray, one of the things that he raved about Keegan in his press conference right after the pick, after the draft concluded, was his dunk percentage. And it's not like Keegan is throwing it down on people, but it's just dropping it in there with two hands and not quite dropping it. You push it down.
Yeah.
And that's obviously the most efficient shot that you're going to get. 24% of his looks this year came at the rim, and he converted 63%, which isn't horrible. Not great for a guy his size. And you want to guess how many dunks he had this year? I was surprised.
Oh.
I expected it to be really low, to be fair.
55.
Yeah, 42. He apparently missed 42 of 48.
He missed 6 dunks?
Apparently, which I don't think is great. But I think it's just and I think this goes hand in hand with physicality. But for me, it's finishing at the rim. You have the size, you have the length, you have the athleticism, and there's so many clear opportunities where it's like right here, you just went up soft, you double clutched, just go through the chest of that guy and throw it down.
Yeah, a lot of people post draft, after he was selected and people got to see him in Vegas and at the California Classic, which, by the way, is back at the Golden One Center, July 3rd and 5th this year. People marveled at exactly how big he was. They're like, oh, he's 6'8", as advertised, as listed. You have the whole oh, in shoes he's this height. That it's like, no, like Keegan Murray is 6'8". He's a big wing, right? He's a 4-man. So yeah, you would think with that type of size, you would think with the way that he played at Iowa, and this is what really, you and I have talked about this before. The way that he played this year as a rookie surprised me a little bit, because the way that he played at Iowa was just it was not the same. Obviously, Fran McCaffrey, Iowa head coach, he's trying to win games. He's going to find the best way to manufacture easy looks for Keegan. Keegan being, just a physical freak that he is, and just, how skilled he was and how talented he was, just put him around the rim. So he played, in that mid post on the block area. They would just run like flex stuff. They'd run like punch sets, stuff like that. They would just give that guy the ball like 8 to 10 feet away from the basket, and he would just go to work. And he dunked the ball a lot. He was able to, at least, over the course of about a 35-40 game season in college, was dunking the ball a good amount. Kind of shows you the gap between, 4th overall pick in the NBA and like average college player was when Keegan was out there. Because, you don't drop 24 points a game in college like that in a conference like the Big Ten without being just an absolute freak of nature. So it's in there. We know it's there. He has to do it more, though. I agree with you. He has to do it more if he wants to take another leap, because this is the NBA. Everybody's a freak now, right? And like the size that you're dealing with and just the physicality you're dealing with is just a completely different thing from college. So yeah, I agree. He needs to be dunking more. He needs, just finishing through contact, finishing around the rim. I agree. That's got to be an improvement. For me, I think it's his self-creation off the dribble. That's what I'd love to see him improve. Again, we saw flashes of this during the season. Some of that stuff would just come out of nowhere sometimes, and you think to yourself, where is that all the time, right? And I think it might be Keegan's natural personality, kind of just who he is. He doesn't really, it kind of seems like he's a guy who definitely doesn't want to step on anybody's toes, right? He knows he's playing next to De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. Those two guys are going to be your best players. Those two guys they're going to be dominating the majority of the usage, right? But I wouldn't be shocked if coming into training camp this year, Fox and Domas tell him, hey, we don't care about our usage. We don't care about you taking shots. Shoot the ball. and start creating for yourself because you're going to need to. And it was in game 4. So this was the game. Yes, this was the game where, sorry to bring this up, Kings fans, when HB missed the shot at the end of the game. Keegan was fantastic in that game. And there was a play where he took a handoff and like snaked it and took a pull-up jumper from like 17 feet and knocked it down. And I'm like, dude, if that guy can do that kind of stuff off of DHOs, coming off of screens, he's going to be adding a totally different dimension to his game that teams are going to have to account for. And if your third best player can do something like that on offense, then your team's going to take a leap. Your team becomes that much more difficult to guard, right? Because late clock situations where you're thinking, oh, okay, that's Fox. Give Fox the ball and get out of the way. I'm sure you're still going to default to Fox 9 times out of 10. But if he's not on the floor or if teams try to take him away in those types of situations, you'd love to have somebody else out there with some self-creation ability. If Keegan can add that to his game and layer on more self-creation, tighten up the handle a little bit. I mean, I think that's his big swing skill. And if he can get that down, that's the difference between him being, a career 12 to 15 point scorer, spot up 3-point threat that might struggle in the playoffs, as opposed to a guy who could average upwards of 20 points per game and really be, your 1B, 2A, 2B kind of player and help your team take a leap. And if he can make a huge leap during his rookie contract doing that, that signifies some pretty good things for the Kings with his current core.
35 pull-up threes this year for Keegan Murray, 14 of 35, 40%, and that's compared to 465 catch-and-shoot threes.
Wow.
And 49 pull-up twos, knocked down 23 of them, 46.9%. There's a little bit in the playoffs, 3 of 6 on pull-up threes, and 7 of 9 on pull-up twos. I agree with you. That's where his game goes to the next level. Mm-hmm. That's where we're talking about a completely different player, a completely different career arc. It's where this Chris Middleton comes in.
I was literally just thinking Chris Middleton too. That's what everybody always brings up.
Yes, and going through this draft cycle, I've come to realize Chris Middleton is everybody's new favorite comp.
Yeah,
it's for everybody. It's for everybody. Keegan has said it himself that it's somebody he looks at his game. So I'll roll with it. I'll let it slide. But God, it's used everywhere. I never thought that Chris Middleton would just be used everywhere.
Chris Middleton being
an ideal one.
Chris Middleton being the 3-man, 4-man comp is the same as the Chris Murray being mocked to the Kings thing in every mock draft, right?
Dude, I saw it again yesterday. I was like, dude, please just let me see somebody else. God, I'd be super happy with Chris Murray. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, same.
For content's sake and for just having fun brainstorming. God, please, people, don't you get tired of it?
I do, because it's just it just seems very lazy. Just seems very, very lazy.
Agreed.
So
agreed. Next up, which by the way, I totally messed up the orders and don't mean to disrespect Malik Monk, who averaged 1.3 more points per game than Keegan Murray, but Malik Monk, you're up first.
Oh man. I mean consistency as well. With him, I think there was a good month stretch where, before that second game against the Nuggets at home when they played the back-to-back where he just went off and had 30 some odd points or whatever, he kind of just disappeared. And he'll do that, and he'll do that for long stretches. And then, if you look within a game, sometimes just within games, he'll do that as well. He'll just disappear. So consistency, he knows his role. He knows what works for him out there. I thought this was the first season for Malik. He showed a little bit. He showed a little bit of it in LA. But throughout in the entire course of the season, this was really the first season I think I've seen from Malik where it's like, yeah, he plays with it. He's mostly playing within himself, and he knows his role, and he knows what works for him out there, and he's not really going to force the issue. And you think that the forcing the issue stuff goes away, and then it'll just resurface, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, where was the Malik just 5 minutes ago where he wasn't forcing that? I look at game 4 against the Warriors and then game 6 against the Warriors, where it's like he was doing so much positive stuff when he first got out there on the floor, being so patient, waiting for things to develop. And then in the second half, you're just like, where did all that go? Because game 4, I'll always remember the sequence where he kind of slowed down, waited for Alex Len to catch up to him on the fast break, laid off a beautiful dump off pass, dunk, right? And then in the second half, when the Kings were trying to pull away and trying to win this game, and they're locked into this battle with the Warriors, Malik comes in, he's all over the place, just turning the ball over. It was just wild stuff to see. But he mentioned it a lot of times during the regular season. Like, this is going to be the first time I'm going to be in the playoffs. Maybe it was that. Who knows? But even in the regular season, he was up and down a lot. I do think that some rough stretches cost him a legitimate shot at being the sixth man of the year. So for me, it's a consistency thing with Malik Monk. Like, can you go out there and do the same thing every single night that the coaches love, right? That the coach, like when the coaches put you out there, you should be doing the things that you should be on the floor for. Can you do that consistently and not deviate from that? I think that's the big thing for me with him as far as improvements go.
Definitely a good one. I actually struggled a little bit to think of one for Malik, but consistency should have been the obvious one. I think that's a great pick. I think I love your point of, if he played more consistency, he could have been in six man of the year conversation. That was like really flirted at the beginning of the year. Coach Brown attempted to make a mini campaign, and then I think realized that wasn't going to happen at one point. But I went with turnovers. Malik averaged the most turnovers per 36, except for Alex Len. And it's not horrible. It's like a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He obviously gets dimes as well. It's kind of just, there's players in the league that you just need to allow one or two, just forgive them for one or two plays a game. Like, they're just going to do something that you're like, what in the world? But if you just, I just treat it the same way that I admittedly treated Dante DiVincenzo, and he's apparently very polarizing.
Yeah.
Where there's going to be one or two times a game where you're like, why did you just try to do that? But if you go into it thinking, all right, that's one, and you get one more after that, you might need to sit down. But
yeah,
I think that just maybe being a little less chaotic is kind of what I went for, but I hesitate because chaos is part of Malik Monk's game.
Yep.
And sometimes it works amazingly. It's just turnovers for me. If it's a bad shot, there's a chance it goes in.
Yeah.
Turnovers is a total waste.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah, and especially when he's, he definitely loves to thread the needle sometimes. He'll try to get a little too fancy and too cute off of pick and roll, that kind of thing. And live ball turnovers will just, they will come back to haunt you. You're giving somebody else a transition opportunity. If I had to choose, I'd, as far as which turnovers to get, it's just like, dude, just throw that thing into like the third row. At least your defense gets set up. But he loves trying to thread the needle and loves trying to get a little bit too cute sometimes. And yeah, I mean, that'll come back and that'll bite you and that'll haunt you. So yeah, I that's also a good one. Just keep those turnovers down.
Yeah. Rebounding also could have been mentioned. That's the same way that Coach Brown was talking about Kevin Huerter. He was grouping Malik Monk in there often. I will say, shout out everybody that we mentioned so far. The least games played is 75 for Kevin Huerter. That all these guys played a lot of minutes. The most minutes of any 5-man in the NBA, 900 total minutes, and it was by a lot. I don't know. It wasn't even close in front of me. No, it was not at all. Next up, got Davion Mitchell, and this has got to be the most obvious one on here. 3-point shooting.
Oh yeah.
He shot 32% from three. We obviously know what he can do on the defensive end. I don't think he's somebody you want initiating the offense, but good news is you have other guys out there that are able to do that. Specifically, he comes in for Fox, usually as first substitution, and then can run with all the other guys that can play make, specifically playing through Domantas Sabonis, or Malik Monk is out there that can be the other playmaker. So I'd love to see him take steps in that aspect. But as of right now, if that 3-point shot takes a notable jump from the 32% he shot this year, and that's also 34.6% on catch and shoots, and when he was considered wide open by NBA stats, which means no defender within 6 feet, 31%. And teams were straight up ignoring him at times. If that takes a jump, and we obviously know the insane work ethic of Davion Mitchell, like he could be seeing significantly more minutes, and just really, it would allow him to play next to De'Aaron Fox.
Yes. Yeah. And obviously that's huge when you're thinking about alleviating some of the workload on Fox defensively, right? Like, if Fox is going to be your point of attack defender for every second that he's going to be out there on the floor, that might hurt his production on the offensive end. You're kind of limiting the ceiling of what Fox can give you offensively if he's going to have to be at the point of attack every single game. and on every single possession is being put in like pick and roll, right? Davion also for the playoffs, during the 7 games in the playoffs, 25.9% from 3 on just under 4 attempts per game. That's, it's not going to get it done.
Their adjustment at the end was to fully lean into their shooting, and that meant less Davion.
Yeah, and obviously that hurts when Steph Curry goes supernova and scores 50 points. And I don't care what anybody says about the whole, he took 40 shots to get 50. I don't care. The guy dropped 50 points, and the Kings were not making it look particularly difficult for him out there. Yeah, I mean, easy choice. It's the shooting. He has to be a factor out there. He has to be able to space the floor. He has to be a threat. And look, I'm with you. Look, he in his 3 years in college showed significant improvement, year to year. And then that year that they won the national title at Baylor, I think he ended up somewhere in like the mid 40s shooting from 3 and on pretty decent volume. I remember. I do remember also somebody on the night of the draft asking Monty, do you think that's a good thing, or do you think it's just an anomaly that he had a good shooting year? And Monty was like, yeah, we think it's good that he got better. Yes, that's a good thing. But we've seen that a lot with college players where these guys take a few years to come out. And then, if they come out as upperclassmen, you'll see that, they had a great shooting year their last season in college after showing significant improvement compared to their first few years. And then they just don't really refine. They can't rediscover that in the NBA for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of the longer 3-point line. Obviously, I mean, it's 2 feet longer in the NBA. But like the first guy that comes to mind for me as far as Kings related, somebody that happened to was Justin Jackson. Like Justin Jackson didn't shoot the ball very well his first 2 years in college. The year they won the national title, he shot like 44% or something like that. And then in the tournament, couldn't throw a rock in the ocean. The Kings make that pick, and the Justin Jackson of the March Madness version of the North Carolina Tar Heels that year was the guy that they got. Like the guy could not knock down a shot in the NBA. And I don't think Davion's a lost cause, but I really hope that, it can go one of 2 ways right now. And I really hope it doesn't go the direction of, he's just going to be a guy who's just not going to be able to shoot and be much of a factor from distance in the NBA. So yeah, I'm with you. That's an easy choice. Like, be a better 3-point shooter. Everything else will probably just work itself out as far as it goes for Davion Mitchell.
Yeah, I was scared that you were going to throw a shot at Robert Woodard there, but I'm glad that Justin Jackson took the stray anyways. Next up, we got Kessler Edwards. And I think
WCC legend Kessler Edwards.
Currently recruiting Max Lewis.
Oh, man. Hey, I'd love to see that. Yeah, as bad as Pepperdine has been for the most part, ever since I've been a St. Mary's Gales fan, they do get some guys that come through, and Kessler played on actually a pretty decent Pepperdine team with a guy named Colby Ross that really pushed St. Mary's a few years. And getting to see him in college, it's like, it's all there. He's so toolsy, right? Like these guys with tools are the guys that you would like to spend more time with as a coaching staff and see if you can develop what they have. Kessler has the tools to be, obviously he's shown it, be a pretty effective defender. I think for him, consistency from the 3-point line, I think this is a recurring theme for a lot of these dudes, but consistency from the 3-point line for him, that's going to be huge because they tried an experiment early on in the season where, hey, do you remember the first few games of the year where KZ Okpala was starting? A lot of people have forgotten, apparently, but the Kings tried that by putting a player of that archetype out on the floor to see how that works with the other 4 players. Turns out, if the defense is just not going to acknowledge that you're out there, it makes it a little bit more difficult for your star players to get where they need to go and to get buckets, right? And Kessler at least showed some spot up shooting ability. There's of course that game in Phoenix where he was just huge, hit some huge clutch shots, really gave Booker a tough time down the stretch, gave them just enough on defense for the Kings to win that game. We know what he can do defensively. Offensively, can you be more consistent from the 3-point line as a spot up threat to at least make defenses have to worry about you a little bit? And that way teams can't sag off of you and take away Fox, can't take away Sabonis, Keegan, Kevin Huerter potentially, right? I think for me, he needs to show a little bit more consistency as a spot up 3-point shooter and really carve out a role for himself on offense like that in order to make an impact on the team. And I don't know about you. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that picking up the team option is a no-brainer?
Yeah, I should have started with that. It's a 1.9 $2 million player option. I think so. I think like if you need to free up that money because you also renounced everybody else, and I think they can get something close to like 25-ish million. I could be off, give or take. And say that like Kessler's money is restricting you from doing that, then like sure, I let him go. But I don't really see that 1.9 million being restricting, and I think that he showed enough. I mean, like, yeah, towards the end of the season that I think it'd be good to hold on to him. 22 games played. This is, I mean, basketball reference. I'm sure at least like 5 of those games he played 10 seconds. Coach,
Yeah.
I swear him and KZ Okpala would get checked in
Mhm.
for the final defensive possession of the first half only multiple
Yeah.
times this year. But 306 minutes, 22 games played, quote unquote, right? Do you know how many threes per game he shot this year? This is my first time seeing this number, I feel like.
3.5.
5.1.
Wow.
And knocked down 34.9%, 10 points a game.
So
That's
when he
wild.
was out there, he was letting them fly.
He definitely was getting them up,
Yeah.
and they went down at an okay rate. Obviously, you need a much larger sample size than 300 minutes out there, but I think that was it was somewhat encouraging. I think that cutting could go into there as well. He's an athletic guy, and then I did kind of go for defensive discipline. I think just not getting in foul trouble is really important when you're such a specialist like he is. So that's where I went with Kessler. Next up, we got Richaun Holmes. This one, so I initially tweeted this out a little while ago, and I've kind of adjusted some of them. But for Holmes, I literally just put question marks. Since I had to come up with something, I wrote down bring the dog back. Like, what happened when Richaun Holmes went out
Man.
there? He was the guy that was outworking everybody. He was fighting his ass off, going after balls that you're like, you have zero chance of getting there.
Mhm.
Actually, you have like a 0.1% chance, but he's freaking riding that 0.1%.
Yep.
And I would just love to see that. I don't know the opportunity he's going to get. I understand he's obviously had a lot of off court stuff going on. And I'm sure that the on court situation is a frustrating one as well. But bring the dog back, man.
Same. I miss it, man. I miss it. I miss 14.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. Richaun Holmes
On
from the
85% from the field.
yeah, and it's for some reason he's just like a ridiculously good 3-point shooter for a big. I miss it. He's regardless of what has happened these last couple of seasons with him, his contract and all that stuff, man. I love the guy and his family too. Like they really did assimilate themselves so well into the community. And they just seem like fantastic people. So I just want the best for the guy. But the dog has gone missing, man. The X-ray, if you pull up an X-ray, it's nothing there,
Yeah.
So the dog coming back would be great. But I don't know about you. I expect him to be, use this salary in some sort of move this offseason to facilitate a deal.
I think if they can, they will. Depends if it takes what more it would take to dump him. If it's seconds, dump. It sounds. I hate using that word. I love Richaun
Yeah.
Holmes too.
Yeah,
I love
well,
Richaun Holmes too. I think that everybody in Sacramento probably loves Richaun Holmes. PJ Dozier. What do you got for PJ Dozier? We're really getting into the weeds here. And by the way, PJ Dozier
man.
does have a $2.4 million non-guaranteed deal. As I click on his name here to see if it tells me how much is non-guaranteed. It's fully non-guaranteed, but becomes guaranteed on July 10th. So I guess there is a question with Dozier, but I like him.
Yeah. Look, we're talking about these are the guys at the end of the rotation right now for the Kings, right? If you have Kessler Edwards, Richaun Holmes, and PJ Dozier towards the end of like your rotation, or just like just outside the rotation, you're doing pretty well. Obviously, this was the deepest roster the Kings have assembled in a long, long time. Very, very weird to think about because these three guys, like in past iterations of the Kings, they'd be getting minutes, they'd be getting heavy minutes, and that's why the Kings could never win more than 35 games in a season usually. For him, it's what's your role? Like you need to find a way to carve out a role for yourself, right? Like and if it's not you that's going to make that decision, then you have to do things obviously mostly in practice to to help the coaches help you define what your role is. So, what is your role in this team? As far as the basketball side of things go, like what purpose do you serve role wise on the actual court? And then, if you're not going to play very much, can you handle, right? Like that veteran leadership type of role. Matthew Dellavedova knew exactly what the deal was when he signed with the Kings. He seemed like the perfect person for that role. And he was fantastic at it. A lot of guys in the locker room sung his praises and said, hey, he was very, very important to the team ecosystem and to the team morale. There's that story of how Delly sat down with Terrence Davis to check on him and made sure that he was doing all right. And then TD started playing some really good ball after that. Like, can PJ Dozier take on a role like that? I'm not, he's not like a vet. He's not like up there in age, but he's been around, and I'm sure that, he can help some of the younger guys, kind of adapt to league life and to make sure that they're doing okay and checking in on guys like that. So, basketball wise, can you find a role for yourself? If not, can you accept being a guy that's just going to be part of the culture and, not make a big stink because you're not playing very much?
Well, this is a guy that had 2 30-point games this year for the Wolves, of Iowa. So I think his role is obviously a star, and he just is not been given opportunity. It's disgusting what's happened this year.
Yeah. His shooting splits in the G League were insane.
Pretty ridiculous.
Before he came back the second time with the Kings on that second 10-day or the second contract for the rest of the year, he was shooting lights out in the G League.
Yeah. He went and proved that the Kings should bring him back, and they did that. I have convinced myself that PJ Dozier is a cash 3-point shooter. I think that he's showed it a little bit throughout the course of his career, but I swear this man does not miss in warmups and has the prettiest looking jumper I've ever seen. I don't know why, but I gush to everybody that's there early enough to see PJ Dozier. One of the first people warming up that's like, I'm telling you, this guy just has a cash jumper. But I think that the direction I went fills into yours because he does need to find a role. But I went with working on that DHO game. I think that if he could pull up off of DHOs from threes behind that screen, if he can fake and cut, I think that shooting is there a little bit. I think he has a little bit of everything. But to me, working on that DHO game is kind of working on playing within the flow of this Sacramento offense. So I think we kind of went in the same direction with that one. Next up, we'll go with G League MVP runner-up. We'll start with Neemias Queta, the only guy actually not under contract, restricted free agent. I'm sure if the Kings want to retain him, it won't be difficult. I don't think there's a bunch of people chasing after Neemias Queta unless they're really trying to tend to the Portuguese audience. But what do you have for Queta?
I mean, it's obviously dominant in the G League, right? You look at just the sheer size of him, and you're just like, this is unbelievable that he can even move the way that he does out there. So against G League competition, I'm not saying it's a cakewalk. I'm sure they're very, very skilled and talented players at the G League level, but he makes it look easy sometimes, and the numbers would suggest that. You just said he was the runner-up for league MVP, right? There's something there. I think for him, and this was something that there was that debate all season about, well, what do the Kings need? They need another wing who can, give you two-way production, or, we need a backup big, right? Neemias Queta could be the solution in-house to getting some rim protection behind Domantas Sabonis, right? Like, Domantas Sabonis is not a rim protector. We know that. He knows that. Everybody's well aware of that. He's just fine on the perimeter, right? But he's not going to do anything crazy out there. Once he comes off the floor, if you're not going to have overlap with that DHO game, at least get somebody out there who's just a big body, right? So that you can protect the rim. Neemias Queta could be that. So I think for him, the thing that he needs to show, not necessarily improve, but the thing that he needs to show, at least to the coaching staff, assuming that they do retain his rights and bring him back, is that he can be the solution as the backup five. Like, show them why you were worth, the draft pick, and then worth developing too these last couple of seasons. And with Queta, we saw it last summer league. there could be some overlap there on offense. He can run the DHO game. It's
Yep.
not going to be as effective as Domantas Sabonis because he's not the passer that Domas is, but he can at least look comfortable running a DHO. It's not like Chimezie Metu looked all that bad doing it, but Nemi though, he looked really, really comfortable. And you know what? At Utah State, they did run everything through him his last season there. His assist numbers were kind of shocking when I looked at them, but also the turnovers were kind of high. So, there's some give and take there with him. He definitely has to play within himself. He has to understand his role when he does that. But last summer league, they ran a ton of that DHO stuff with Nemi. I think he can do that at the NBA level. He's just got to show that he can stay out there on offense, not be a net negative, and then prove to the Kings, like, yeah, look, you invested 2 years of development into me. I'm here and I'm ready to show you that it's time for me to be up on the big league roster to help you guys out.
I don't think he'll play in summer league, but I would love to see him go out there and just kick some
Yeah.
ass.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good. I think that the one specific standout to me would probably just not getting in foul trouble,
Yeah.
which is also just defensive discipline when it comes to blocking shots. Like, just random the Paul George podcast, which I've grown to love, by the way.
Okay.
I went on a little binge recently, but he just had Jaren Jackson Jr. on and talked about at the beginning of his career, he was swatting a lot more,
dude,
which is very typical for bigs, right? Specifically shot blocking bigs. Like, you want to get that block, but just having the discipline to keep your hands split back, the patience, and just kind of trusting you have good positioning and are going to be in the way, I think is super important for a guy that has the potential to be a shot blocker. But the other thing I went with is, like, I think consistency was really big even throughout the course of the G League. It's a very basic, broad term, but there were nights where he looked dominant, and there was other nights where you just didn't even really feel him out there. To start with your assist numbers, like, he did have a game with 6 assists. He had 4 different games with 5 assists. And then there's 2 games with 0 and a handful here with 1. That's not really the inconsistency I'm talking about, but just pointing out the passing that you highlighted. But it's the fact that you get a 31-12 game or a 28-10 game. There's a 26-8 game. And then you also look, and there's a game where he plays 32 minutes and he gets 9-13 is actually not bad. But a 10 points and 4 boards, or a 10 points and 5, 10-8, 10-7. Like, there were just nights where you really didn't feel him out there, and then other nights where he was dominant. And for a guy that genuinely can be dominant with his size, I think it was a little surprising that there were as many times as there were where you just kind of didn't really feel him. So I think consistency there definitely stands out to me. And last one we got, Keon Ellis. I think I'm up. We're going to do, I think adding strength for Keon is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
He definitely looks like I mean, I think anybody would look at him and be like, all right, you could probably use putting on some muscle, especially being a little bit smaller. And I know they're trying to use him as a 1. I think his passing did take a notable jump this year, but that's coming from a pretty low starting point. I think he was a guy that had more turnovers than assists in college. If not, if it did favor assists, it was barely. It was practically a 1-to-1 ratio there. And that did take a jump this year, 3.4 assists going to 1.8. But as a guy that's smaller and probably not going to be the one, you need to be able to guard 2s and 3s, rather than just 2s. And I think it's going to be the weight that needs to do that.
Yeah, that was the number one thing the second that he was signed as an undrafted free agent. You really, during the pre-draft process as well, watching him at the combine before the draft last year, he didn't have a strong combine. And I think it became apparent almost right away to anybody who was watching, and especially the scouts there. He struggled largely in part because he was just very, very frail, like frame-wise. And, maybe that was the reason why he ended up being undrafted. Maybe he influenced his way to Sacramento because his agent was telling people, don't take him. He'd rather be in Sac, and he'll sign the 2-way there. Who knows? I was shocked that he wasn't drafted personally, but I think if there was a reason why he was not selected with one of the 60 picks last year, it was because of the frame. So I would agree with you there. I think he does just like a little bit, like definitely does seem like he has put on a little bit of muscle. Obviously, being on an NBA roster, playing in the G League, it's having access to the nutrition programs and the weights and all that stuff and the athletic trainers and stuff. Like, yeah, you'll get stronger just naturally, just doing that on a day-to-day basis. But probably is going to need more. I mean, I think he came in at, measured in at like 6'4" or something like that. People thought he was 6'6". He ended up being about 6'4" and a quarter without shoes, I think. And came in at like 170 or 175. And if you're not a true point guard, and it's even a stretch for a true point guard at that weight. But if you're not a true point guard and you're not out there facilitating and you have to guard twos and your minutes figure to be, if you were on an NBA team, his minutes probably would figure to be with another, primary ball handler or facilitator out there. You're going to have to guard up a spot, maybe even 2 spots, like you said. Got to get stronger. So I'm in agreement with you. He needs to get stronger, but he should be at the California Classic, July 3rd and 5th at the Golden One Center. And we should be able to see, for those of us who will be there, and they'll be broadcasting the games too. We'll get a firsthand look to see if he's improved in that aspect and to see if he's added anything else to his game. And I'm excited about that for sure.
Absolutely. I hope he gives whoever he's guarding hell.
Oh man,
I'm ready for it.
I made all those joke mixtapes last summer where I'd put an R&B song over like Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis, and Neemias Queta highlights. And I watched Keon, one of the ones that I made for Keon recently, and there's just some stuff that he was doing on defense where I'm just like, oh my god, his lateral movement. I'm like, Davion Mitchell has the craziest lateral movement I've ever seen, at least from a Kings player. It's nuts.
The deceleration,
the deceleration,
insane.
And
it's the nerdiest thing that I love.
Yeah, seriously, like he can just stop on a dime while on defense, which that's the opposite of what you'd expect. We admire guys and we marvel at guys who can just, he stopped on a dime with the ball in his hands or whatever. But Davion can do that on defense. Keon's not that far off. Keon was doing some stuff where I was like, wow, Davion refuses to be screened. He sticks to his man so well, navigating around ball screens. I saw some of that same stuff from Keon, and Keon also, there were a few plays where he was like 2 steps ahead of the defense. Like I saw Frankie Ferrari get hung up. Yeah, Kings Summer League legend Frankie Ferrari got hung up on a UCLA screen. And from the opposite wing, Keon saw that happening, sprints over, cuts that off, and gets a steal from a guy throwing a pass from the opposite wing where he was coming from. I'm like, this is unbelievable. So his instincts are there. His natural ability, his lateral movement, all that stuff, it's there. It's just, how much will you be able to make an impact with all that at your current frame? Probably not much in the NBA. So he's going to have to for sure put on more weight, more strength.
We will see. Summer League's going to be fun. It's wild to me that Miami's in the finals with the 18th pick in the draft. And I'm excited that Luke Laux gets to coach the team. I think that's going to be a fun opportunity for him. I'm excited that we get to talk to him. I think he's going to have fun quotes and moments running that team. And I think that's all I got, Jrue. I got one more random BS question before we get out of here. I didn't want to just like say bye after this. I want one other thing real quick.
Okay.
They talked about Jeff Green playing for like 29 different teams this year or in his career. And like the one is Sacramento. Not actually true. What is it? 8?
It's at least
something like 8. That.
It might
maybe he's been to the playoffs with 8 and it's been more, something like that. Right.
Boston.
Total BS for no reason. This probably doesn't even make sense. But Jeff Green in Sacramento, would you like that? Are you a Jeff Green fan? Like
huge
Uncle Jeff backup 5?
Huge Uncle Jeff fan. He had the open heart surgery, right? When they found out that he had arrhythmia or whatever it was, took a year off, comes back. I mean, that happened, I think, really early on in his career.
In Boston. I'm not gonna lie, I was heartbroken when he was traded for Kendrick Perkins, but I guess I'll accept it.
Yeah, the end result there was,
and then he balled out.
Fine. Yeah.
But
look, he's a great story. Seems to be the consummate pro. Everybody he plays with loves him. Bring him to Sac. Bring him as another veteran presence. Assuming
Carter.
Yeah, and obviously not as old, right? But he's been there, done that. Could win a title this season, right? I'd love to see that just because I just love the guy. So give me Uncle Jeff. I'd be down with that. What about you? How you feeling?
Yeah, just for the vibes, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not saying like this is a great idea. Front office, don't do this probably. But I love Jeff Green. And I just was like, when they said on the broadcast today that he wants to play into his 40s and he's 36 right now, I was just like, shit, he'd be fun in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thought. There's nothing deeper than that.
Right. I mean, assuming that Harrison Barnes does not come back, you could use another steadying, nice guy, upstanding gentleman presence in the locker room, right? So give me Uncle Jeff, man. I'd be down. Make it happen, but probably don't make it happen if you're the Kings front office, like you said.
Agreed. Anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, Arby's has rotated the 2 for $7 again. So if you go this time, there will be a new menu. They've phased out the latest roast beef sandwich that they had on the 2 for $7, but you can still get mozzarella sticks or premium chicken tenders with your 2 for $7. So if you visit your local Arby's, make sure you get the best deal in town. Undoubtedly, the Arby's 2 for $7.
All right. I'm not going to say the same Arby's line I said last time. We're just going to stay away from that one. My last thing is that it's ridiculous to me that Sasha Vezenkov is in his Greek Basket League finals, and they went 22-0 in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
They went, I think it's best of 3 in the first round, and then best of 5, and then later 2 in his playoffs. They won 2-0 in the first series, 3-0 in the next series, and they're currently up 1-0. They have a chance to go fully undefeated.
Unbelievable.
Greek Basket League is not the same as EuroLeague competition, obviously, where they came in second in the regular season to Monaco, actually, which Chima Moneki's on. Doesn't play a great amount, but on that team, mainly Mike James. But pretty wild to me. Still, when I was writing my Sasha piece, I'm like, damn, 22-0? Like, you didn't lose one?
They could have a perfect season. And we didn't even touch on the latest development in that, and how somebody was saying that he has reservations about coming over, but I guess we can have a conversation.
I maybe didn't even see that. We will have a Sasha episode. And by the way, I told somebody I would talk about Trey Murphy. They asked me to talk about Trey Murphy and like the idea of trading for Trey Murphy. And I told them I don't think that's really possible, but I'll talk about Trey Murphy because I love Trey Murphy.
Yeah.
We'll do that next episode because this one's ran for a while. It is late, but I did not forget you. We will talk about Trey Murphy eventually.
All right.
All right, Drew. That's all we got. Again, I'm Brendan Nunes. We got Jrue, that local guy on Twitter with an O. Zero for the O.
Zero.
Yeah. I don't know why I struggled there. Take a look at the Kings Herald to find good work from myself and all the other great guys and gals that are there, and peek at their Patreon to support local independent Kings coverage. And if you enjoyed this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. And you'll hear from us again next couple days.